EA Bullets YouTube channel.
Hurry up, now tell us why you're here.
Brad Keselowski would start at pole position for the second race of 2013, where Michael McDrivewell would be out on lap 21 because of an engine failure. And on lap 66, Chip Gearings would be out because of an engine failure. But on lap 143, Jack DePost would be out because of Joey Logierno. Why, you mean yellow and red car? And then Sebastian Silva would fail to wreck that car on lap 145. And then on lap 217, Rex Revler and Doug Throttleman would accidentally wreck each other. And then Ryan Newcar would be out on lap 334 because of an engine failure. Brick Hicks would go down a lap as a result. Same with Ace Arrowhead. Lightning McQueen would lead the most laps, leading for 148 laps. But it would be Matt Kenseth who would win the second race of 2013. With Casey Corner finishing second that race, Brad Keselowski finishing third, Lightning McQueen fourth, and Cal Weathers rounding out the top five. And who was the last car to finish on the lead lap? It was Brian Sparks, who surprisingly qualified for this race. The car that would start first for the third race of 2013 would be Kyle Busch-Tire. And then on lap 44, Chip Gearings would be out because of an engine failure. And then Ryan Thunderbolt Jr. would be out on lap 130 for the same reason. 10 laps later, Marcus Kranksler would be out because he hit the wall really hard. And then Joey Logierno would wreck too many cars. Why? And then James Garrison would fail to wreck Joey Logierno on lap 309. And then Kyle Busch-Tire, the mean yellow car, would lead the most laps, leading for 171 of them. And then he would go on to win the third race of 2013, with Martin Carrix Jr. finishing second this race, Carl Edwards third, Jimmy Cable's fourth, and T.G. Castlenut rounding out the top five. And Kurt Busch-Tire would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 37th this race. And this was his reaction. Kurt Busch-Tire, don't say that word! Lightning McQueen would start at pole position for the fourth race of 2013, where Reb Meeker and Chip Gearings would accidentally wreck each other on lap 45, and then Scott Speed would be out on lap 88 because of engine failure. And then Chick Hicks mistook him for Lightning McQueen. At least Craig Shiftright mentioned the mean green car's mistake. And then Craig Shiftright's own racer, Joey Logierno, would wreck Ryan Newcar on lap 137. And then on lap 338, he would wreck more cars! Why? At least Craig Shiftright said that is not what Joey Logierno is supposed to do. And then Sebastian Silva would wreck the mean yellow and red car on lap 384. And then Craig Shiftright points out, that is what happens. And then Ernie Gearson would go down 5 laps as a result of the caution. And then Carl Edwards and Lightning McQueen both led the most laps, leading for 122 laps each. But it would be Carl Edwards who would win the race, winning the fourth race of 2013, with Lightning McQueen finishing second this race, T.G. Castlenut finishing third, Denny Carlin fourth, and Jamarcus Capehart rounding out the top 5. Now, Doug Throttleman would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 32nd this race. T.G. Castlenut would start at pole position for the fifth race of the 2013 season, with Jack DePost wrecking Kyle Busch-Tire on lap 78. And then the very next lap, Chip Gearings would be out because he ran out of fuel. How? And then Ernie Gearson would retire from the race on lap 84 because he got too tired. Samuel Serpentino and Bogart Hopscotch would wreck each other on lap 106. And then on lap 139, Joey Logierno would wreck Billy Carjoy. Why? And then Jack DePost would wreck Joey Logierno, the mean yellow and red car, on lap 143. Tony Gassworth would wreck Denny Carlin on lap 162. And then Jack DePost would be out because of an engine failure. But James Garrison would fire the pity responsible for the engine failure. And then Reb Meeker would be out on lap 213 because of yet another engine failure. And then Matt Kenseth says that he is not like his JGR teammates. And here is Jeff Burnton, who is out on lap 351 because of a failed jump, and Maury Clutchburn would be out on lap 370 because of an engine failure. And then Kurt Busch-Tire would be out because of an engine failure 5 laps later. And then here is his reaction. Kurt Busch tire, don't say that word! And then T.G. Castlenut would lead the most laps this race, leading for 146 of them, including pole, and then he would go on to win the 5th race of 2013, with Matt Kenseth finishing 2nd this race, Jimmy Cable's 3rd, Dale Earnhardt Jr. 4th, and Sebastian Silva rounding out the top 5. Lane Locke would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 30th this race. Bobby Swift would start at pole position for the 6th race of 2013, where James Garrison would wreck the mean yellow car, Kyle Busch tire, on lap 78. The other mean yellow car, Joey Logano, would flip Phil Takeson on lap 115. And then he would wreck Ryan Newcar, who went airborne on lap 163. Jack DePost would luckily be the hero who would wreck the mean yellow and red car on lap 164. Chip Gearings would be out for, you guessed it, an engine failure on lap 231. And then Denny Carlin would wreck Jack DePost on lap 234. Why? And then Sebastian Silva would wreck Denny Carlin 5 laps later. Tony Gassworth would fail to wreck Matt Kenseth on lap 247. And then, on lap 259, Reb Meeker would be out because of an engine failure. Ernie Gearson would accidentally wreck Tommy Highbanks and himself on lap 266. And then Danny Kerbin would be out on lap 268 because of an engine failure. And here was his reaction. Yeah, you're kind of right, Danny Kerbin. And then Trick Hicks says this. Why, you mean green car? And then Craig Shiftwright once again says this. And then the King also has a reaction to the mean green car. Mark Outerbrakes would be out on lap 289 because of an engine failure. And then Terry Carcass would go down a lap as a result of pit stops. T.G. Castlenut would once again lead the most laps, leading for 46 laps this time, but Lightning McQueen would be the winner of the 6th race of 2013, where Bob Cutlass says this, as Lightning McQueen got his 78th career victory. Cal Weathers would finish 2nd this race, Clint Bocard finished 3rd, Casey Corner 4th, and Brick Yardley rounding out the top 5. Speedy Comet would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 30th this race. Was he all that speedy though? But Denny Carlin would start at pole position for the 7th race of 2013, where Samuel Serpentino would wreck Rex Reveler on lap 44. Why? And then Bogart Hopscotch would wreck his rival Samuel Serpentino on lap 60, and then Speedson Larson would wreck Bogart Hopscotch 6 laps later. And then Speedson Larson would go from 36th on lap 66. On the very next lap, he would be in the lead! How? Probably because he didn't pit. But Joey Logano, the mean yellow and red car, would wreck too many cars! And then Piston Cup fans would boo the mean yellow and red car, for obvious reasons. And then Craig Shiftwright says this: you never wreck Mark Carton. And then Chip Gearings would be out on lap 200 because of yet another engine failure. And then Phil Tankson would fail to wreck Joey Logano on lap 207. And then Speedson Larson would be out on lap 235 because of an engine failure. And then Chick Hicks! Why did you say that? And then Piston Cup fans would boo the mean green car. And here is another green car. He is a Piston Cup fan and had says this to the mean green car. And then Reb Meeker would be out on lap 344 because of an engine failure. And Parker Braikston would be out on lap 472 because he hit the wall too hard. For the 3rd race in a row, T.G. Castlenut would lead the most laps, leading for 128 laps, but Joey Logano would wreck Denny Carlin and himself on the final lap. And then Denny Carlin would be out for 4 races as a result. And then Kyle Busch tire says this, showing the haters how it's done. Then James Garrison says this to the mean yellow car. And then he would push the mean yellow car out of the way on the final lap. And then James Garrison would win the 7th race of 2013, getting his very first career victory. With Jamarcus Cakart, his teammate, finishing 2nd, the mean yellow car finishing 3rd, Dale Earnhardt Jr. 4th, and Bobby Swift rounding out the top 5, with Murray Clutchburn being the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 24th this race. Jimmy Cables would start at pole position for the 8th race of 2013, where Mark Carton would have this new look for 4 races. And then Jimmy Cables would lose the lead immediately after the race starts to Lightning McQueen, who would lead the first 18 laps of the race. But the mean yellow and red car would once again wreck too many cars. And then Ernie Gearson would be out on lap 96 because of an engine failure. Remember when Tony Gassert failed to wreck Matt Karzif? Matt Karzif actually wrecked Tony Gassert on lap 128. And then Rev Rodages would be out on lap 186 because of an engine failure. And then Ryan Newcar would go airborne on lap 189 because of Kyle Busch Tire. Why, you mean yellow car? And then Phil Tankson would wreck the mean yellow car on lap 205. And then Joey Logierno would wreck Phil Tankson only 7 laps later. And then Craig Shiftright said, "Take that, Axler!" But Phil Tankson is not an Axler, which James Garrison points out. And then Craig Shiftright says this. Uh-oh. And then here is Andrew Axler, who says this, defending Phil Tankson. And then the Shiftright-Axler rivalry has restarted as they got into a tire fight. And then Bob Cutlass says this. And then Daryl Cartrip remarks that this was normal when he was racing back in the late 70s. And then Piston Cup officials are trying to escort both Craig Shiftright and Andrew Axler out of the grandstands. But an anonymous Piston Cup fan says to a Piston Cup official to not do that. And then Andrew Axler says this as a result. Same with Craig Shiftright, both agreeing that they should stay out of trouble. And then Ace Arrowhead would wreck Joey Logierno on lap 216, and then Brad Keselowski would wreck Ace Arrowhead back on lap 220. 5 laps later, Sebastian Silva would wreck Brad Keselowski on lap 225. And then Rex Revler would wreck Sebastian Silva 12 laps later. And then Jamarcus Kakart would wreck Rex Revler on lap 248. But then Brick Hicks would be out on lap 305 because of an engine failure. And then Doug Throttleman would jump over both Jeff Burnton and Kurt Busch-Tire on lap 315. Kurt Busch-Tire, don't say that word! And then Jeff Burnton is actually impressed with how Doug Throttleman jumped over him. TG Castlenut, for the 4th race in a row, would lead the most laps, leading for 69 laps. But it would be Cal Weathers who would win the race, with TG Castlenut finishing 2nd this race, with Lightning McQueen finishing 3rd, Brick Yardley 4th, and Matt Karzif rounding out the top 5. The last car to finish on the lead lap of the 8th race of 2013 would be Jeff Burnton, who would finish 26th this race. Matt Karzif would start at pole position for the 9th race of 2013, where Pitbull Speed Racer says this to Jay Corner in qualifying. And then Chip Gearings would be out because of, you guessed it, an engine failure on lap 19. And then on lap 105, Jack Armstrong would also be out because of an engine failure. And then Kyle Busch-Tire would wreck too many cars on lap 186. And then Sebastian Silva would wreck the mean yellow car on lap 349. Ernie Gearson would retire from the race on lap 368 because he got too tired. And then Greg People would be out because of an engine failure on lap 391. And then Brad Keselowski would once again wreck Ace Arrowhead on lap 392. And then Ace Arrowhead would join Garrison Motorsports as a result. And then James Garrison says this about joining the team. And then Ace Arrowhead says that he will handle the funding from his sponsor, Switchback Spoilers. Once again, TG Castlenut, for the 5th race in a row, would lead the most laps this race, leading 42 laps this race. But it would be Kevin Karvik who would win the 9th race of 2013, with Clint Bokar finishing 2nd this race, Joey Logierno finishing 3rd, Phil Tankson 4th, and Brick Yardley rounding out the top 5, with Mark Carton being the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 34th this race. And then Craig Shiftright is laughing at how Phil Tankson did not win the race. And then Andrew Axler says this, but will Phil Tankson win next week? And then Andrew Axler asks James Garrison for a favor, and here is what James Garrison says. Well, no one wants the mean yellow and red car to end up in victory lane. And then Lightning McQueen would start at pole position for the 10th race of 2013, where Rex Revler would wreck Sebastian Silva on lap 1. And then here is what Sebastian Silva said in response. Well, he is right that the race just started. And then Rex Revler says it was just team orders. And then here's what Jack DePost said in response. And then Jack DePost would wreck Rex Revler on lap 2. And then Joey Logierno would fail to wreck Carl Edwards and Speedy Comet on lap 6. And then Brad Keselowski would wreck Jimmy Cables on lap 10. But Jimmy Cables would not be out. And then Craig Shiftwright says this. Craig Shiftwright is right. And then Nick Charger would be out on lap 32, his car number, because of an engine failure. And then Speedy Comet would be out on lap 212 because he hit the wall too hard. And then Aaron Breakwheel would be out on lap 229 because of an engine failure. And then Joey Logierno would lead the most laps, leading for 94 laps. But Phil Tankson would push Joey Logierno into the wall on the final lap, which would result in Piston Cup fans cheering. Hooray for Phil Tankson! And then Bobby Swift would go on to win the 10th race of 2013, with Phil Tankson finishing 2nd this race, Matt Kenseth finishing 3rd, Lightning McQueen 4th, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. rounding out the top 5. And surprisingly, Chip Gearings would finish on the lead lap. Same with Ernie Gearson, who would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 38th this race. Kyle Busch would once again start at pole position, starting up front for the 11th race of 2013. And then Ernie Gearson would be out on lap 3. Why, you mean green car? Did you have to say that? And then Craig Shiftwright says this to the mean green car. And Andrew Axler actually agrees with his old rival, Craig Shiftwright. And then both Andrew Axler and the mean green car would get into a tire fight. And Piston Cup official Tom doesn't even stop the fight, because everyone hates the mean green car. Check X! And then the mean yellow and red car would wreck too many cars on lap 245. And then Jamarcus Cakehart would fail to wreck Joey Logierno on lap 258. And then Marcus Kranksler would be out on lap 310 because of an engine failure. Casey Corner would lead the most laps this race, leading for 59 laps. And then he would go on to win the 11th race of 2013. With Kyle Busch, the mean yellow car, finishing 2nd, Brad Keselowski finishing 3rd, Kurt Busch finishing 4th, and Clint Bokar rounding out the top 5. Once again, Jeff Burnton would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 32nd this race. And James Garrison would start at pole position for the 12th race of 2013, where Brad Keselowski would wreck too many cars on lap 40. And then Jack DePost would wreck Brad Keselowski on lap 339. Danica Speedtrick would be out on lap 385 because of an engine failure. And then once again, Casey Corner would lead the most laps this race, leading for 161 laps. But it would be Lightning McQueen winning the 12th race of 2013, with TG Castlenut finishing 2nd this race, Kevin Harvick finishing 3rd, Kyle Weathers 4th, and Casey Corner rounding out the top 5. David Raycar would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 28th this race. But with Lightning McQueen's win this race, Lightning McQueen has earned his 79th career victory, which puts him ahead of his late mentor, the Hudson Hornet. And with this, Lightning McQueen would end the 12th race of the 2013 Piston Cup season top in points, with Matt Kenseth and TG Castlenut not far behind him, with Cal Weathers being 4th in points and Carl Edwards rounding out the top 5. Clint Bokar and Bobby Swift are just unlucky to be missing out on the top 5 right now. Casey Corner has pushed himself up to 8th, and Jimmy Cables would be 9th in points, with Dale Earnhardt Jr. rounding out the top 10 with 1/3 of the Piston Cup season finished. Brick Yardley and Kevin Harvick would be 11th and 12th in points respectively, with Brad Keselowski, who's been wrecking too many cars, in 13th, and then with another mean car, Kyle Busch not far behind him. And in 15th is Martin Carx Jr., and only a few points behind him would be James Garrison in 16th, with Greg People being behind him in 17th. Phil Tankson is in 18th right now, and behind him is Ryan Newcar the Rocket. Maybe he's not so much of a rocket right now. And not far behind him is Jamarcus K-Cart, who himself is less than 10 points ahead of many other cars, like the mean yellow and red car.
Remember to press the notifications button, which goes ring, ring, ring after you press it. And lightning strikes back, and that's as if you subscribed, of course. And thank you for watching this entire video.
In the first third of the 2013 Piston Cup season, we have seen Lightning McQueen eclipse his late mentor, the Hudson Hornet, in terms of Piston Cup wins. And we have also seen the reignition of the Shift-Right-Axler rivalry between Craig Shift-Right and Andrew Axler, this time involving Garrison Motorsports. But at least the cars at Garrison Motorsports are still wrecking the mean cars. And why won't the mean green car of Chick Hicks stop? He needs to stop making fun of other cars. The next third of the 2013 Piston Cup season, races 13 to 24, will be coming out soon enough. Although, unfortunately, the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine is still going on, despite it having started over 2 years ago. The Ukrainian people just want to live in peace and have freedom. But there was one tyrant who got in the way of this common dream, and that tyrant is the tyrant and bully Vladimir Putin, who is the one who began this needless war, where millions of people needed to leave their homes because it was no longer safe for them to live. And then, due to Putin's orders, the Russian army has taken over more of Ukraine. At the moment, they control around 1/5 of Ukraine's territory. And even worse for Ukraine, Ukraine does not have enough soldiers to fight off Vladimir Putin's tyranny. And this is leading to Ukraine losing even more territory to Vladimir Putin's tyranny. We here at the Hashtag KABullets YouTube channel stand with Ukraine in their fight against Vladimir Putin's tyranny. And also recognize Ukraine's true borders, which include Crimea, the Donbass, and the other territories, such as parts of the Kherson and Zaporizhia Oblasts, as well as the Kharkiv parts of the Kharkiv Oblast, which are legally Ukrainian territory, in spite of what Vladimir Putin says. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, Nechai Shvitsya Daroretsia, Ukraini Permoha. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. May Ukraine be granted victory very soon.